Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. South Africans have a right to a functioning local government that can provide clean water, electricity and sanitation. But corruption has left much of the sphere of government unable to fulfill its role. This has led to disclosures by whistleblowers who report actions that are illegal, fraudulent, criminal and corrupt, but often at a high price. For more on this, we're joined by Johandri Wright, a post-doctoral fellow at North West University. Very good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time. I mean, whistleblowers in South Africa have some sort of protection, but there are gaps, and very visible gaps, where whistleblowers are saying that they've lost everything and they can't go back to living in South Africa, perhaps, or even working in South Africa. What is your take?
Yes, this is definitely true. For just to have a starting point, we have the Protected Disclosures Act, which gives some form of protection to whistleblowers in the form of a prohibition on occupational detriment, which means that if you're in an employment relationship and you make a disclosure relating to criminal activity, then your employer is not allowed to proceed with disciplinary hearings or other occupational detriment against you. And then we also have the Witness Protection Act, where in certain circumstances, if you're called to testify in the court during criminal proceedings, that you are entitled to some protection measures such as relocation and other measures that might be needed. But this means then that you have no other support in terms of physical safety should you not testify in a court in criminal proceedings. And this is often not up to any whistleblowers. This is up to the discretion of the public prosecutor, which would be prosecuting the case. That also means there's no mental or emotional support, and it has been found that many whistleblowers in the end suffer from anxiety disorders and they constantly feel unsafe. There's also no financial support because more often than not, in spite of having a prohibition against occupational detriment, many whistleblowers are not able to go back to their workplace and they have no form of income. And then there's also no measures provided for other social services or any other supports that whistleblowers might need.
Yeah, I mean, a lot has been spoken to around how, lots of commentators are saying that we don't need any more Babita Deokarans, and what we need now is for the strengthening of whistleblower laws. As you took to your doctoral thesis and explored the various topics, what sort of perspective came out on the law and corruption in local governments and ways that it can be prevented?
So then we have a whole range of laws and legislations that, if it's implemented efficiently, it'll go to a great deal in preventing corruption, especially in the local government sector. I especially looked at the policy commitments which local government makes in preventing corruption and especially in strengthening an integrity framework. Part of this integrity policy framework is adopting policies on how to treat whistleblowing, put in measures for safety such as anonymity, undertaking a commitment to protect whistleblowers and to prohibit retaliation against whistleblowers. And it's sad to say that the majority of municipalities did not have such a policy to protect whistleblowers. We have 257 municipalities in South Africa, and only 90 had a written commitment that they would protect whistleblowers and that they prohibit any form of retaliation.
And at which point did you find that witness protection is used when it comes to whistleblowers?
So in my doctoral study, I stuck to a desktop study, which means I only looked at the law as is. I did not conduct any empirical work, which means I wasn't in a position to go speak to people on the ground. Now this is a limitation to the study, but this was mainly done because corruption is such a sensitive topic in South Africa at the moment. If you look at the ethical clearance and other implications of such a study, you do not really want to conduct a study that would potentially endanger more lives, even though you are in a position to have some form of anonymity. It can only protect people that far.
How can the country benefit from the amendment of some of these laws in the long run?
So currently there's this whole culture of people are very cautious on blowing the whistle. Number one, there's not enough information on whistleblowing. Where would you go to? What would you do? What support you will get? But I think in strengthening the legal protection for whistleblowers, it'll definitely encourage them to come forward. And if we could do that in partnership with some campaigns on how and where to blow the whistle, what implications it'll have on your life, it'll definitely increase the numbers of whistleblowers.
So as you went and did some of your research, what did you find as one of the matters and the challenges that really stood out when it comes to the entire process of speaking out and then being left to really fend for yourself, essentially?
One of the biggest challenges is that whistleblowers do not have access to legal advice prior to blowing the whistle. So they do not know what their rights are, how they are supposed to be protected. Any criminal or civil liability that might flow from blowing the whistle. In other words, whether their employers or the institution against their blowing the whistle, if they retaliate legally, institute civil litigation, what their rights are. But I have suggested a couple of reforms, and one would be improving the definition of witnesses, or how to improve witness protection. That would be to broaden the scope and to include other people like family and friends as well, to have them protected. And to also extend the definition of protected disclosures, that they're not only people in an employment relationship, but also if you are maybe in a procurement relationship or any other commercial relationship to the institution that you're blowing the whistle. Even people such as the people on the street blowing the whistle on corruption inside the South African Police Service, for example, that those types of disclosures would also be included. Another interesting point that I picked up was that you are only entitled to protection if you make these disclosures to the public protector and the Auditor General. Now, the ordinary people on the street might not even know where to contact the public protector or the Auditor General, and it was very strange to me that, if you blow the whistle to some institution like the South African Police Service or the National Prosecuting Authority, that those types of disclosures were not considered as protected disclosures.
What about the, rampant corruption in the country? Just looking at the current, atmosphere as you and I speak, that high level of corruption versus, the very few whistleblowers who are brave enough to speak and put their lives at risk, how much of an impact is the current climate when it comes to perhaps some gains that will be made and perhaps those gains being reversed because of how rampant corruption is in South Africa?
I think it just emphasizes the importance of reviewing our current legislative framework on whistleblower protection and maybe really, really considering the introduction of an independent and impartial institution responsible for whistleblower protection. You cannot, with corruption being as rife as it is in South Africa, we often are in a position where the very institution that's responsible for witness protection, which is also the protecting whistleblowers, is the South African Police Service. And there has been many years now that Corruption Watch has showed that the South African Police Service is one of the institutions that's most corrupt in South Africa. So when we revise the legal framework and we maybe introduce an independent and impartial institution, it might also encourage whistleblowers in general.
Very well. Thank you so much for weighing in on this discussion, Johandri Wright, a post-doctoral fellow at North West University, really just speaking to whistleblowing and some of the studies that she conducted when it comes to some of the gains and the solutions in curbing the very lives that may be in danger as we weigh the whistleblower protection.